The river of Ndoro never slept. Even when the moon hid behind clouds, its waters whispered like a restless spirit, brushing softly against the rocks that lined its bank. The people of Ndoro village believed that the river had a soul, a mother spirit who watched over them, blessing those who honored her and punishing those who took more than they needed. That night, Ekwu, the fisherman, pushed his canoe from the muddy shore long after the other men had gone home. The wind carried the scent of rain and the low hum of crickets. His wife, Ngozi, had begged him not to go. "The river speaks tonight," she had warned. "I heard her voice in my dream. She said her children are angry." But Ekwu had smiled and kissed her forehead. "Dreams are just smoke, my wife. We need fish. Tomorrow is market day." Now, out on the wide black river, he regretted not listening. The air was too still. The moonlight trembled on the surface like frightened eyes. His paddle dipped softly in and out of the water, breaking the silence with a hollow rhythm. When he cast his net, it spread across the water like a silver bird taking flight, then sank, swallowed by darkness. Ekwu waited. He hummed a fisherman's song, the one his father taught him, to pass the time. But the river gave no reply. No splash, no ripple, nothing. He began to pull the net in, muscle straining. It was heavier than usual, much heavier. His heart jumped. "At last, the river has given me bounty," he thought. He pulled and pulled until his arms burned, until the canoe rocked dangerously. Then he saw it, a pale shape tangled in the net, glistening like wet clay under moonlight. He gasped. It wasn't fish. It was a woman. Her skin shone faintly, smooth as river stone. Her hair spread out in the water like dark weeds. She wasn't breathing, or so he thought, until her chest rose, slow and deep, like a wave coming to life. Ekwu froze. Every tale his grandmother had ever told him about the spirits of the water came flooding back. But greed and fear wrestled inside him. If he returned without proof, the village would laugh at his story. If he saved her, perhaps the gods would bless him. So he lifted her, cold and limp, into the canoe. Her eyes opened. They were not human eyes. They shimmered with the color of moonlit water, reflecting not just his face, but something deeper, the endless dark of the river's heart. "Who are you?" he whispered, voice shaking. The woman said nothing. She blinked once, slowly, then looked away, her gaze fixed on the water as if it called to her. He rowed home in silence, pretending not to notice the faint smile on her lips. Behind him, the river stirred, waves rising though there was no wind. Something beneath the surface followed his canoe, silent and unseen. By the time he reached shore, a light rain had begun to fall. Ngozi rushed out of their hut with a lantern. "What have you done?" she gasped, seeing the woman lying motionless in the canoe. Ekwu only said, "She was drowning. I couldn't leave her." But when Ngozi's lantern flickered, its flame bending toward the stranger, she saw water dripping not just from the woman's hair, but from her body, as if she were still underwater. And then, far across the river, thunder rolled. It sounded almost like laughter. For 3 days the strange woman said nothing. Ekwu's wife, Ngozi, watched her carefully. The woman ate little, drank nothing, and spoke no word. She would sit by the doorway, gazing toward the river as if listening to voices no one else could hear. At night, when the house fell quiet, Ngozi heard her humming, a low, watery tune that seemed to come from far away. Sometimes it drifted through the windows, soft as mist. Other times, it sounded from inside the walls, making the goats restless and the children cry in their sleep. Ekwu, proud of his rescued stranger, ignored the signs. He told the villagers a tale that grew wilder with every telling, how he pulled a woman from the river's heart, how the gods themselves guided his net. Some said he was blessed, others said he was cursed. But they all came to see the silent woman with their own eyes. They called her Nandi, the one who returned. But no one dared to touch her. The village elders muttered that Ekwu had broken Dumiri, the sacred boundary between the living and the spirits of the water. One old woman even refused to fetch water from the river anymore. "The deep ones do not give gifts," she said. "They take payment later." Still, Ekwa would not listen. He built a small bed for Nandi in the corner of his hut and brought her new cloth to wear. His wife wept when she saw it. "You treat her like a wife," Ngozi whispered bitterly. "I treat her like a guest," Ekwa replied, but his voice betrayed doubt. That night the air felt heavy. The fire in their hut refused to stay lit. Even the dogs outside whimpered and clawed at the ground. Ngozi held her children close, whispering prayers to the ancestors, while Ekwa lay awake beside the silent woman, unable to close his eyes. At midnight, Nandi rose. Her movement made no sound, as though her feet didn't touch the earth. She walked out of the hut and toward the riverbank, her white cloth trailing behind her like a serpent. Ekwa followed, heart pounding. The moon had vanished behind thick clouds. The river was black and restless. Nandi stood at the edge, lifting her face toward the darkness. And then she began to sing. It was a voice unlike any human's, smooth and deep like moving water, carrying sorrow and power. The river answered her song, waves rising and falling in rhythm. The air trembled with her melody, and Ekwa's mind filled with strange visions. Cities beneath the water, silver-scaled beings dancing under coral arches, a throne made of shells and bone. When the song ended, Nandi turned toward him. "You brought me here," she said at last, her voice echoing with more than one tone. "Now I am bound to this place." What are you?" Ekwa stammered. She only smiled. "A child of the deep. The river remembers every name. Even yours." Before he could answer, lightning flashed across the sky. For an instant, Ekwa saw her reflection in the water, not as a woman, but as a creature with eyes like pearls and hair floating like seaweed. Her lower body shimmered like scales beneath the surface. Then she was gone. Only ripples remained where she had stood. Ekwa stumbled backward, heart racing. He looked around, but the forest was silent again. The river looked calm, innocent, as though nothing had happened. By morning, Nandi was back in her bed, dry and still as before. That day, when the other fishermen went to cast their nets, not one caught a single fish. The river lay empty and silent. The elders gathered at Ekwa's home, faces stern. "You have disturbed the deep," said old Chief Orji, tapping his staff. "Send her back before she takes what belongs to you." But Ekwa looked at the pale woman by the door, and something in her eyes held him. It wasn't anger. It was sorrow. And though the ancestors warned through the mouths of the elders, Ekwa said quietly, "She stays." The wind rose suddenly, scattering dust through the yard. Far away, thunder rolled across the hills, and this time it did not sound like laughter. It sounded like a promise. The river of Ndoro began to change. Its once clear waters turned murky and thick, swallowing the reflections of the sky. Fishermen came back empty-handed, their nets dripping with black slime instead of silver fish. Women who washed their clothes along the bank whispered that the water had grown colder, and that sometimes, when the wind was quiet, they heard crying from beneath the surface. At first, the villagers blamed the season. Then they blamed Ekwa. It began when he brought her, they said. He offended the deep ones. Even the children stopped playing near his home. When Ngozi went to the market, the other women shifted away, pretending to busy themselves with yams and palm oil. "The fisherman's house smells of the river," they whispered. And not in a good way. Ekwa tried to ignore them, but he saw it too. His goats refused to drink from the bucket of river water he fetched each morning. The plants behind his hut wilted overnight, their leaves turning gray as ash. At night, frogs croaked louder than ever, then fell silent all at once, as if something large had moved through the water. And Nandi, the strange woman, grew stronger. She no longer sat like a helpless stranger. Her eyes were sharp now, alert, and sometimes glowing faintly when the moonlight touched them. She began to hum again, but her songs were different, darker, heavier. The walls of the hut trembled with the sound, and sometimes the river answered, rising slightly before settling back down. Ngozi had stopped sleeping in the same hut. She moved with her children into her sister's home across the compound. "She is not one of us," Ngozi told her husband. "You have brought death in the shape of a woman." But Ekwu, torn between pride and fear, refused to listen. "You don't understand," he said. "She speaks to me sometimes. She tells me things, about the deep, about secrets only the river knows." "Secrets?" Ngozi spat. "You are learning from a ghost." That night, the village dogs howled until dawn. When the sun rose, everyone smelled the stench before they saw it. Dead fish floated along the riverbank as far as the eye could see. Their scales had turned black, their eyes white and empty. Children screamed. Elders began to chant prayers. The chief sent word for Ekwu to appear before the council. The gathering took place under the great Irako tree. The air was thick with incense and fear. "Ekwu," said Chief Orji, "you have brought a curse upon Ndoro. Return the woman to the river, or we shall drive you both away." Ekwu knelt before them, torn. She was helpless. "Would you have me let her drown?" "She is not of flesh," an old woman cried. "She belongs to the waters." Before he could answer, a shout rose from the direction of his hut. A boy came running, wide-eyed and panting. "She is gone," he screamed. "The river woman is gone." The council ran toward the river. There, standing knee-deep in the dark water, was Nandi. The current swirled around her, and her voice rose in that same eerie melody that made the world seem to tremble. And then, before their eyes, she disappeared beneath the surface. The villagers gasped. Some fell to their knees. But moments later, the water began to boil, frothing and roaring like a pot on fire. A whirlpool opened where she had vanished, spinning faster and faster until it reached the shore. The ground shook. Palms bent. The villagers screamed and ran for cover. When it finally stopped, the river was calm again. But where the whirlpool had touched the shore, all the grass had withered to dust. And deep in the center of the river, something glowed faintly, like a pair of eyes watching from below. That night, rain fell for the first time in weeks. It was thick and red as rust. Inside his hut, Ekwu sat trembling beside his fire. Nandi was back, sitting by the doorway, dripping wet, smiling faintly as though nothing had happened. "You see," she whispered, "the river listens when I sing." And for the first time, Ekwu realized he was no longer her rescuer. He was her prisoner. For many days the sky refused to clear. A dull, brownish fog lay heavy over Ndoro village, blurring the outlines of trees and huts. The people spoke little now. They fetched their water from far away and left offerings of white chalk and kola nuts by the riverbank, hoping to calm whatever anger had risen from beneath. In Ekwu's home the air was colder than outside. The fire in his hearth barely smoked anymore, and the smell of river salt clung to everything. The mats, the food, even the children's hair. Ngozi's sister begged her to leave the place completely, to come stay in the next village where the air was still sweet, but Ngozi's heart ached for her husband. "He is blind," she told her sister, "but he is still mine." At night, she would creep back across the yard to see him. Each time she came, Nandi would be there, sitting by the door, her hair gleaming with dampness, her eyes fixed on the dying flames. Ngozi would feel her heart twist with fear and rage. "Spirit or woman," she muttered once, "you will not take my husband from me." Nandi looked up, smiled faintly and whispered, "He is already taken." That same night, their youngest child began to cough. At first it was light, a dry, rasping sound that came and went with the night air. Then it grew deeper, harsher. By dawn, the boy's skin was hot to the touch and his breath shallow. Ngozi went running to the old healer, who burned herbs and poured palm wine onto the ground for the ancestors. "This is not sickness from the body," the healer said. "This is sickness from the river." When Ngozi returned, she found Ekwu kneeling by the boy's mat. He was whispering prayers, eyes wide with fear. Nandi sat nearby, humming softly to herself. Do something, Ngozi cried. She brought this. Ekwu turned sharply. Enough. You will not speak of her that way. But even as he shouted, the boy shivered and grew still. The silence that followed was unbearable. Outside, a single toad croaked once, then stopped. Ngozi wailed. Nandi only lowered her head, murmuring, "The river takes what it is owed." That day the boy was buried near the forest edge, wrapped in white cloth. The villagers did not come to comfort them. Some watched from far away, making signs of protection over their chests. 3 days later, Ngozi's second child fell ill. Then the next. By the end of the moon, the laughter that once filled Ekwu's home was gone. Only he and Ngozi remained, and the silent guest who no longer pretended to be human. Sometimes, when Ekwu returned from fetching wood, he found water dripping across the floor though it had not rained. Sometimes he would hear her voice calling his name from outside, but when he looked, no one was there. One dawn, he woke to find footprints of wet scales leading from his doorway down to the river. He followed them with a trembling lantern. They stopped at the edge of the water where something gleamed beneath the surface. A golden bracelet, the same one his wife used to wear. He stumbled backward. His voice cracked into the fog. Ngozi. But the river only rippled softly, answering with a whisper that could have been wind or laughter. By midday, the villagers found Ngozi's body floating near the bend, her eyes open, her face calm. They said it was the river's doing. They said the spirit woman had claimed her. Ekwu didn't speak a word. He sat by the fire that night, staring at the empty mats, while Nandi circled the room humming that same tune. "You brought me from the deep," she said gently. "You tied our worlds together. Now nothing can divide us." Ekwu looked up at her and for the first time saw her clearly. Her shadow stretched too far across the wall. Her reflection in the water pot moved though she did not. Her voice carried the hum of waves and the hiss of drowned sand. Something inside him broke. When dawn came, he packed a bag and went to the oldest diviner in the hills. "Tell me what she is," he begged, "and tell me how to kill her." The road to the hills was long and heavy with mist. Ekwu walked alone, barefoot, carrying nothing but a small gourd of palm wine and a string of cowrie shells. The trees around him whispered with the morning wind, their leaves slick with dew. Once or twice he thought he heard footsteps behind him, soft and wet, like something dragging itself through the forest. When he turned, there was only silence and the smell of river salt. By dusk he reached Oba Muo, the cave of spirits, where the oldest diviner of the region lived. Few dared to visit. It was said that the man could speak with the dead, that his eyes had seen both the world of men and the world below. Ekwu knelt at the entrance, heart pounding. "Wise one," he called. "I seek help. A spirit has entered my home." From the darkness came a low, rasping voice. "Enter, son of the river." Ekwu stepped inside. The air was thick and cool. Small fires burned in clay pots, their smoke coiling up like thin snakes. At the center sat the diviner, old, blind, and draped in animal skins. His eyes were pale as fog, but they glowed faintly in the firelight. He motioned for Ekwu to sit. "Tell me," he said, "what did you bring up from the deep?" Ekwu told him everything. The night he cast his net, the strange woman, the deaths, the haunting. His voice trembled as he spoke. The old man listened without interruption, running his fingers over the shells laid before him. When Ekwu finished, the diviner sighed. "You have touched what must never be touched." "What is she?" Ekwu whispered. The diviner took a long breath. "She is not a woman. She is Nandi of the deep, daughter of Miri Oka, the White River god. She was banished long ago for devouring men who tried to steal her songs. Her prison was the current itself. By pulling her from the water, you broke the seal." Ekwu's mouth went dry. "Then, I freed her?" "You freed her hunger," the diviner said. "And now the river itself is unbalanced. The land dies because she lives among men." He leaned forward, his blind eyes unblinking. She has taken your family to mark her dominion. But her work is not done. She will soon return to the water, and when she does, she will pull the entire village with her." Ekwu's body went cold. "Then how do I stop her?" The diviner reached into a gourd and brought out a small charm of feathers and bones, tied together with red thread. "You cannot kill her with blade or poison," he said. "Her body is of the deep. You must strike her through the bond she created." "What bond?" "You," the diviner said simply. "She is tied to your breath. The night she came to your hut, she gave you her song. It lives inside you now, that is why she cannot be far. To destroy her, you must call her true name and burn the thread between you. But the fire that ends her will not spare you." Ekwu's heart thudded in his chest. "You mean I must die?" The diviner nodded slowly. "Balance demands blood. The same hand that freed her must bind her again. You can save the village, but you will not walk back into the morning." Ekwu sat in silence. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant hills. Finally, he bowed low and said, "Then show me how." The diviner took out a clay bowl and filled it with river sand. He traced strange symbols in it, whispering to unseen spirits. The flames flickered green. "Take this charm," he said, placing it into Ekwu's palm. "And when the moon is full, go to the place where you caught her. Stand by the water, call her by her river name, Nandi Muo, and when she comes, strike the earth with fire." As Ekwu turned to leave, the diviner added in a cracked voice, "Do not look into her eyes when she dies, or the river will remember your face." The fisherman bowed again and stepped into the night, his heart heavy with dread. Behind him, the cave fell silent except for the sound of dripping water, and the faint echo of a woman's laughter rising from deep within the earth. The moon rose heavy and yellow that night, swollen like an omen. In the village of Ndoro, doors were bolted early. The air smelled of storm and decay, even the crickets had gone quiet. Only one man walked the empty path toward the river, Ekwu, the fisherman who had loved the deep too much. He carried a clay pot of fire and the charm the diviner had given him. Around his neck hung a rope of dried leaves and feathers, meant to shield his spirit. But still his hands trembled. The closer he came to the river, the colder the air became, as though he were walking into another world entirely. He passed the forest edge where his children had once played. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches whispering his name. He saw flickers of movement, shapes that might have been shadows or spirits. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The river was calling. When he reached the bank, the place was unrecognizable. The sand was dark and soft as mud. The water moved slowly, thick and black under the moonlight. A smell of rot hung in the air. He stood there, staring into the current, and memories came flooding back. The night he had cast his net, the sound of her voice, the day his family died. He dropped to his knees, clutching the charm. "Ancestors," he whispered, "forgive me. I brought evil into your land. But tonight I will return it." Then he heard it, a soft hum, faint but familiar. It drifted over the water like smoke, weaving through the night air. The same song that had haunted his dreams. He froze. The fire in his pot flickered and nearly went out. From the river, a figure rose slowly. At first, she looked as she had the day he found her, graceful, fragile, almost human. But as she stepped closer, the illusion broke. Her skin shimmered with scales, her hair floated around her like seaweed, and her eyes were not human eyes anymore. They were deep, blue-black whirlpools, endless and cold. "Ekwu," she said softly, her voice echoing like water in a cave. "You came back." He forced himself to stand. "You killed them," he said, his voice shaking. "My wife, my children, the village suffers because of you." Nandi smiled faintly. "They were taken by the current you disturbed. You and I are bound, Ekwu. The river knows your name now. You cannot undo that." "I can end it," he said, raising the charm. Her expression darkened. "You would destroy what you freed? After all I gave you? After all I am?" The wind shifted, howling through the reeds. The river began to churn, its surface bubbling as though boiling from within. "Come with me," she said, her voice both tender and terrible. "Live beneath the waters. There is peace there, no hunger, no death, no fire. Only the song of the deep." Ekwu felt the pull, a strange warmth in his chest, a whisper in his mind telling him to surrender. His feet began to sink into the wet sand. His heartbeat slowed. For a moment he saw his reflection in her eyes, and it wasn't human anymore. It was something darker, something old. "No," he gasped, forcing his mind to clear. He tore the charm from around his neck and held it high. "Nandi Muo," he shouted. "Daughter of the deep, I call you by your true name." She froze. The waters hissed. Her face twisted, half in fury, half in pain. "Who told you that name?" she screamed, her voice shaking the ground. "Do you think you can speak it and live?" "I will end this," Ekwu cried, dropping the charm into the clay pot. Flames roared upward, red and green. The smell of burning feathers filled the air. Nandi shrieked. The river exploded into waves, drenching the shore. Her form flickered, half woman, half serpent, writhing in agony. "You are mine," she screamed. "You carry my song." Ekwu staggered backward, clutching his chest. The charm burned in his hand. He felt fire and ice rush through his veins, the spirit's power fighting against the flames. Then the river's voice rose, 1,000 whispers at once, calling his name. "Ekwu, Ekwu." His knees buckled. For a heartbeat, he saw Ngozi's face, his wife smiling faintly from the mist, and he knew what he had to do. He stepped forward into the rising tide, clutching the fire tight. "If my blood is the price," he said, "then let it end with me." He plunged the burning charm into the water. The fire didn't die, it spread. The river lit up like lightning, glowing from beneath. The air filled with the sound of screams, human and inhuman, tangled together. Nandi's voice echoed one last time. "You cannot kill the deep, you only feed it." Then she vanished, her body bursting into mist and foam. The river fell silent. Ekwu stood trembling, smoke rising from his hands. He looked down, the charm was gone and his palms were covered in strange marks, glowing faintly blue. His body grew weak but he smiled through the pain. "It's over," he whispered. But somewhere beneath the surface something stirred. When dawn came, the river of Ndoro was quiet again. The fog had lifted and the birds returned to their trees. For the first time in months the air smelled clean. The villagers came out slowly, clutching charms and calabashes of salt, afraid to look directly at the water. They found Ekwu's fishing net tangled at the bank, burned and blackened. His footprints led into the river, but none returned. Some said he had drowned. Others whispered that he had been taken. For many days the people dared not speak his name aloud. But the curse seemed broken. The fish came back, the fields turned green, and no more red rain fell from the sky. The chief called for cleansing rituals. Drummers beat slow rhythms by the river, and the elders poured libations to thank the ancestors for restoring balance. Yet when night came, strange things still stirred. It began with the dreams. Those who had lived near Ekwu's home began to hear water dripping inside their huts though the floors were dry. Some woke to find puddles under their mats shaped like footprints. Children said they saw a man walking along the riverbank at dusk, holding a flickering clay pot. He never looked back. Ngozi's sister was the first to tell the story openly. She had gone to the river to wash clothes. As she worked, she heard someone whisper her name. The voice was low and familiar. She turned and saw Ekwu standing knee-deep in the water. His skin was pale, his eyes bright as the moon. "Leave this place," he said softly. "The deep never forgets." Before she could answer, he sank beneath the water without a ripple. The elders called another meeting beneath the Irako tree. They sent for the diviner again, but word came that he had died the night before, his body found cold beside his fire, his mouth full of sand. The people grew fearful. They performed sacrifices of white hens, goats, and palm wine, but still the river whispered. Some nights, when the moon was full, they said you could hear a woman's laughter from beneath the waves, soft, sweet, and full of sorrow. And if you looked long enough, you might see two shapes standing together in the mist, one man, one woman, watching the village from the shore. Weeks later, a boy fishing alone saw something strange. He cast his net and pulled up a small carved charm. Feathers burned away, threads turned black, but the pattern unmistakable. The elders took one look and ordered it buried deep beneath the sacred tree. "Let it rest," they said. "Do not wake the river again." But the boy kept a small piece of it, a smooth blue bead that had fallen from the threads. He hung it around his neck for luck. That night, when he lay down to sleep, he dreamed of the deep. He saw Ekwu, his body half shadow, half light, swimming through the dark current beside Nandi, whose eyes glowed faintly through the water. Her voice filled the river, calm and endless. "You freed me from the net of men," she whispered, "and now you belong to the current forever." The boy woke gasping, his neck cold where the bead had touched his skin. In the morning, he threw it back into the water, but the ripples spread for a long, long time before they faded. And from that day on, the elders warned, "Never take what the river does not give. Never love what you do not understand. For the deep remembers, and one day, it will come for what was lost."